So let's continue learning on using Excel for various things. Now we have learned on conditional formatting and seen how that can be very helpful. Let's learn one more feature of Excel, and that's basically your data validation. Now this can be very useful when you would want to work on validating the data which is being fed in the cells. So you could limit it to basically a number between a particular value. You could also add some messages to it if you would want, or you could even circle invalid data or clear validation circles. So data validation really helps us in validating the data which is being fed in to particular fields. Now, it's a feature in Excel which is mainly used to control what a user can fill in a cell. You can decide what type of values must be entered. You can also restrict user to enter only valid data, and if any invalid data is entered, an error message will be displayed. Now that's where you can use your data validations. So let's see how that can be done. So for data validation, let's see some exercises here. So for example, you have a name column and you would want to restrict that the name should accept only 15 characters. Now how do you do that? So you can basically select the cells, or you can just select a particular cell and then we can later drag the property to other fields. Now here, once the cell is selected, so for example, let's try this out and let's see if that works. So for example, I will say Peter Johnson, okay, and that is basically 5 and 9 and 12 characters. So let's say junior, and if I do this, it says input length is greater than 15. Do you want to continue? If I say yes, right? So basically it is allowing me to add the value here, but then it has basically violated the rule. Now this is giving a message to the user that the username should be entered less than 15 characters. Now how do we do that? So for this, we can basically select the column and then we can search for data tab and get into data validation. So this is where you can create or select different kind of rules. So for example, I can go into data validation, I can go into settings, and I can say the text length, and that should be less than 15. Now this is the maximum I'm giving, and it says apply these changes to all other cells within the same settings. So I can do this, or I can just drag and drop. So I can basically apply this formula, and now you can in fact randomly check in any particular cell, is the rule applied. So it says text length less than 15. So we can basically control data validation in this particular column, and that will allow only 15 characters. It will pop up a message if the user really wants to go beyond the particular limit. Now you also have similarly date of birth. So the restriction is date of birth should be between 10 Jan 1990 to 30 December 1998. So this is what we want to restrict. How do we do that? So we can select the field, we can click on data validation, and if you see here, I have selected date, and then date is between, and then obviously you can give a range, that is 10 Jan date 1990, 12/30 1998. So that's the start and the end filter which has been applied. And once this is done, you can also check your input messages, which says when cell is selected, show this input message, enter a valid date. So if you see here on the left, there is a pop-up which is coming up which says enter a valid date. Now I can also say when user enters invalid data, show this error alert. So I can say stop, I can say invalid entered, and this is how I have set a rule. So for example, if I just do something like this, and that says invalid date entered, I can do a retry, it will take me back here, but unless and until I do not give the right format, the date will not be accepted. And again, the same thing applies to all the cells. Similarly, email. So we are saying the email should have @ present in the value provided. Now for this, we can use a formula and we can select, well, I would want to apply this rule to all these rows starting from C2 to C14. So let's get into data validation. Let's look in settings, and here we are choosing custom. Now within custom, I'm choosing what is the formula. So I'm saying is number, and then I'm saying find @ for the rows C2 to C14. So the only thing we are concerned about here is the value should have an email icon. You can input a particular message. You can say what has to be done for error alert. So for example, we can basically go in here and we can say invalid email. That's the title I'm giving. And we can say email should contain @. So if I do this and if I say OK, now you can test it. So you can say A, B, C, D, and that says email should contain @, and basically that will not allow me to add the values. So now you have the field called salary. It says salary should be greater than 50,000. Now we can limit the values by choosing a whole number. So for example, for salary, I can go into data validation. I can go into settings. So here I can say something like decimal, or I can go for whole number. So both of the things are fine. It depends on what kind of values get into this particular field. So if I say whole number, and if I say it has to be greater than 50,000, so I'm saying the minimum is 50,000. Or I could have given a decimal, and then I can say greater than, less than, equal, or anything, or even between. So I can select greater than, and then I can just say OK. Now for rank, the rule is rank should be between 100 and 200. So again, we can use a whole number. So ranks will generally not be decimal. So this would be whole number. Salary can be a whole number, or it could be decimals. So we have chosen decimal here. And in rank, if you click on data validation, I have chosen whole number. I've set data between 100 and 200. Input message, nothing. Error alert, nothing. But that depends. I can give this. So this is how you can just do a simple data validation and control the values which land in the cell. Okay, so now let's also understand how we can restrict the values in a particular cell, which might be based on a list of items. Now, for example, here, if you see, I have two columns. So one column basically has the values of city names, and then you have places within that particular city. So if I would want to implement a data validation based on this, so for example, if you see here city, and that basically shows me only the 4 values which can be entered. And if I go to place, then it tells me for Maharashtra, I can only enter Pune, Mumbai, Nasik. Now, how do I do this? So say, for example, you take an empty field and you want to restrict the values of city names. So I could select data validation. I could basically select list, and then it tells me you need to enter the list values, that is the source. So you click here, and then I can just select these fields. Now, if I do this and if I say OK, it has implemented a data validation. But if you look into this, it will show me the same thing, but then it shows me some empty cells which did not have any value. So this is fine, but it would be better if we do it in a different way. So I can select this, and I have already given my city names here. So I can just do a data validation, and here in the source, let me get rid of this. Now I can just have my cursor here. I can select these values, and then if I say OK, so now if you see, my city names have been restricted to these values. And that's how you can implement your data validation. So I have this data validation here, but I will get rid of this one by just doing a Control Z. Now I'll come here and say, for example, I would want to implement the same data validation. Now the easiest way would be in doing this for all my 4 cities. Now if you see here, I have data validation. I could choose Bangalore. And if you come and check here, there is no data validation, but we have implemented data validation here. Now, how is that done? So I could select this, or for example, I can go in here. I can select data validation. I can select list. And then here in the source, I will say for Bangalore, the values should be these. And then if I basically say OK, now if we see, these are the values which are fed into Bangalore. So we could do this, or like what we have done here. So if you can check the data validation rule, I have used list and then I have said indirect F2. So basically I'm giving in a formula which relates to the value which is in for the city Maharashtra. So we could do this, or in a simpler way we could do this and then just drag and drop here. So we could check for Maharashtra what are the values. Let's choose a different city. So for example, Kolkata, and here I will choose. Now since we did a drag and drop, it has basically taken the values of Bangalore. So that's not right. So we select this, we go into data validation, and here I can either feed in the values, that is such as Bangalore. I could basically say something like this, Kolkata, and I could say OK. So now if you see, it shows me the places in Kolkata. Now here we have, let's choose a different city. So for example, let's go for Delhi, and here I can go to data validation and I can just say Delhi. So this is an easier way of doing it. Or if you remember the formula, then what you can do is you can just give in indirect and then basically give the value of the cell for which you would want to keep in the values. So this is how you can do list validation. So you can provide a list of values and then you can restrict the values in a cell which should be belonging to a particular list. So this is how you do a simple data validation by restricting the data in the form of a list. Now let's learn about pivot charts and tables, which is one more very useful feature of Excel and which allows you to work with your data or perform data analysis. Now pivot table is a summary of your data. It is used in cases where there are numerous rows and columns in your data set, and it allows you to group your data in several ways so that you can derive meaningful information from it. Now the visual representation of a pivot table is termed as a pivot chart. Now how do we do that? So let's see an example. Now here is some data. Here you see we have some row labels which basically gives me some category of items here. It also tells me the sum of sales, and basically it gives me per item what is the total sum of sales which were made. Now how do I get this here? So for example, if I would want to delete this, and I would be interested in getting the total sales under each category of items. Now we know that we have different data here and it's huge. For example, on the row end, if I just do a control and right arrow, it tells me what's my right last column. And if I just do a control and down arrow, it tells me there are 9,994 rows. Now I can use this, and what I can do is I can basically work on insert, and go to pivot table. Now this basically tells you need to choose the range. Now since I have chosen my first row and first column, it basically has selected the data, and that's fine. Now do you want the result in a new worksheet? I'll say existing worksheet, and I can choose a location. Now that basically needs me to select a field. Might be we can just select this field, and that should be good enough. So for example, if I close this or if I say OK, so this is basically an indication that my pivot table will be created. Now, what are the fields we are interested in? So as per the problem, we need to find out what are the total sales for each category. So let's go in here and let's select the field category. Now, as soon as you do that, it shows that the rows which are being selected are for this column category, and now we are interested in getting the sales, so we would want the sales per category. So let's select this. So you see sum of sales is selected. Now close this, and that's it. That's your data. So it shows you row labels, it tells you what are the different categories, and it also gives you sum of sales which is per category. Now this is one easy example where we have solved the problem, where we have tried to find what were the total sales under each category of items. So for example, let's have another data set. So again, you can just check how many rows we have, and it is basically the same, 9,994. And if I look in columns, it basically shows me profit is the last column. And here we would want to find out which category. So for example, let me get rid of this. Which subcategory of items sold the maximum under each category? So we have some categories here which says furniture, and it shows some subcategories, and then it shows me office supplies and then some subcategories, and same thing with technology. Now we know how we got this data, but this is different than what we were seeing here. So here we were just getting the categories, but we did not have any breakdown of subcategories within this particular category. And here you see there is a breakdown, and then basically you can also apply a filter which basically says what is the data you want, and if you are interested in finding out a particular value. Now how do we do this? So for example, let me get rid of this. Now we know how we can find out the category of items, but we would want to find out which subcategory of items sold the maximum under each category. So here we are not looking at sales, but we are looking at the quantity. Okay, so what we can do is we can go to the first row and first column, click on insert, click on pivot table. Data is already selected. Let's choose existing worksheet. Let's choose a location in our worksheet where we would want to have this. So might be I can select this particular field and then just close this. So it says this is the existing worksheet. Say OK, and now you need to select your columns. So for example, if I would want the data for categories, so I can select this. Now I know that within category, these are the options which we have, and then there is a subcategory. So let's select that. And if you see here, now we have the data which will be filtered. So based on your category and subcategory, and then we will choose quantity. So it automatically understands that this is something on which summation can be done. So let's select this and close on this. Now if you see here, we have got our items where we can see the subcategories within a particular category. Now I can basically close this, and that just shows me high level categories here. So here I can again select a particular row and column. I can go for either a new pivot table. So we could basically select this. The row is already selected. Existing worksheet is what I want. So now I will select this particular place. Say OK. Now we do the same thing like what we did earlier. So we will select category, subcategory, and quantity. So the data has already come in. Just select this, and now you already have all your data. But this is not what we want. We want to basically apply a filter to this. Now how do we do that? So we can go for slicer. So I can go for insert slicer, and then it tells what are the subcategories which you are interested in. So for example, if I go for something like subcategory and say okay, so this tells me what are the categories you are interested in. So for example, we know that furniture has furnishings with the highest value. So I can select, say, furnishings, and then I was interested in office supplies. So within office supply, I can basically search for here binder. So I can just do a control and select binder, and then I can also know for technology I can select phones. So I'll say control and select phones, and now if you see, the filter has been applied and we have these subcategories which are selected. So we have our data here. Now we don't need really this, so I can just delete this, and I have my data which shows me furniture being the main category, and that has only furnishings, office supply having binders, and technology having phones, and that basically is a filter applied on the result of your pivot. So this is how we are seeing which subcategory of items were sold maximum for each category. So this is how you can easily use pivot tables, and you can do some analysis. Let's look at some more examples. Now, let's see if you have to answer this question, which says which were the top 3 states for each region that made the highest average profit. Now, how do we calculate that? So for example, this is the data we have, and as I've instructed earlier, you can select the first row and first column. You can click on insert, go into pivot table, and that basically selects all your data. We will choose the result should be in this existing worksheet. So select this, click here, and then basically let's select this cell, and I will say okay. So now my pivot table will be here. So we are interested in finding out top 3 states within each region which have made the highest profit, or which have made the highest average profit. So for that, first we will select region. So when we select region, it shows here region, and within region you will then select state. So within every region you have multiple states, so that's what we are selecting. And then we are interested in looking at the profit, so let's select profit, and that automatically shows up here. So we can now say close this. So basically we have all the data, but we are looking at the sum of profit, but that's not what we want. We are looking for top 3 states from each region that made the highest average profit. Now, how do we change that? So here we have sum of profit. So I can do a right click, and basically I can say summarize values by average. So now I'm getting the average here, and that basically tells per region I have the average profit. But first is let's sort this data. So let's go into sort more options, and here I have average of profit. Or for example, as I said, you can select region, say okay, and now it is basically having the regions, and then you have your state value. So again we can do a sorting here, and I can say let's go for more sort options. I'll say descending. The state values should be based on average profit. So let's say okay, and now if you see, in particular region we have the data which has been sorted, wherein you have the highest average profit on the top. Now what we can also do is we can basically Then go for filtering. We can say top 10, but I'm not interested in top 10. So I could reduce this to top 3. And this is the items, average of profit, say OK. And now you see per region, you have the data which is showing me top 3 states, what are the average, and then you are also looking at the subtotal, so which basically says average profit for your west. Now if you would want to arrange this, your west and south and east and central in a particular alphabetical order, if you would want to sort it, you can always do a sorting and you can choose sort Z to A if that's what you would want to do, or you can go for sorting, more sort options, and you want to sort the region which is as of now based on descending Z to A. Let's make it ascending, say OK, and now you see the data has been filtered, so it says per region. Now you can always select this and you can say what is this. So this is basically your average of profit. Now we are looking at each region and the states, the top 3 states as we wanted within a region, and what is the average. Now we have one more question. What is the percentage contribution of each subcategory of products under each category to the total sales? So we know there are different products, there are different categories, and all the categories contribute to the total sales. So we would want to find out what is the percentage contribution of each subcategory of products under each category. So we not only want the category percentage, but we would also want what is the contribution of each subcategory to each category to the total sales. How do we do that? So for that, we need to again just place our cursor here or select the first row and first column, click on your insert, click on your pivot table, and now the data is already selected, existing worksheet. Place your cursor here and then let's select this cell, say OK. Now your pivot table fields are here, so we are interested in category. So let's select category, and then within a category we will have subcategories, and we are interested in the sales data, wherein it is already going to give us the sum of sales, but we would want this in the form of percentage rather than just the sum. Now we can click here value field settings, and it says if you would want to summarize this, it says show value as, and what are the values you would want. So you can straight away go ahead here and say percentage of grand total. So we could do that because we know we will get a sum of sales and grand total. Now I could basically say percentage of grand total, say OK, and then just close this. So once you have closed this, you see already the data is in percentage. So now we have our data with subcategories, but we also want the data to be sorted, might be in a descending order, which tells which subcategory is contributing more than others. We can select how many subcategories we are interested in. So we can basically select one of the subcategory cells, right click. Now you have option filter and you have sorting. So we can say more sort options. Now here I will say descending, and you want the descending to be sum of sales, which is already showing as percentage. Click on OK, and now you see for each category it shows the percentage contribution towards the sales. It shows the subcategories contribution to a particular category and also to total sales. So technically speaking, if you look at all these values which are subcategories, and if you would total them, that would be your total grand total. So this is how we can solve a simple problem like this. What is the percentage contribution of each subcategory of products under each category to the total sales? The next question is, which customer made the lowest profit in the home office segment in each state. Now here we know that we are looking for home office segment. We are looking for customer which made the lowest profit. We are also looking for the state as the main criteria. So in each state, we would look for home office segment, and within that we would look for customer which has made the lowest profit. That means the lowest value of the profit. So how do we do this? So let's get into selecting our row and column. We will go into insert. I'll say pivot table. I'll say existing worksheet, and let me get my result here. So let's say okay. Now that gives me the pivot table. So the first thing is we are looking at per state, and I would be interested in home office segment, or I could first start with segment. Now here we have segment, and in segment I can basically select home office. So I can just do a uncheck and select home office only, and now I can select state. So that will be my subcategory within segment, and then within state we would want to find out the customer. So let's get the customer name, and we are interested in finding out the lowest profit. So let's select profit, and here we have sum of profit. So the fields are selected. Close this, and now you have your data which basically shows me the names of customers which made the profit, but it's not sorted. So we can sort this, and we have state entries also, so that's fine. So what I can do is here I can basically say sorting, go to more sort options. I can say I want to do a descending, or I want to do an ascending based on sum of profit. So let's do that. Now you see the topmost value is the lowest value per state within home office segment. Now what we also want is we just want one value per state. So how do we do that? So we can just go for filtering, go for top 10 values. I'm interested in bottom value, and in that also I'm looking for only the lowest value. So let's select 1, say okay, and now you see we have data for home office segment per state, customer who has made the lowest profit. So we have easily answered this question using our pivot table. Now say for example we have a question which says find the sales made in each quarter of 2016 for all the regions. So the data has to be divided quarterly, and use order year as a slicer. We can do that by selecting what data we would want to slice, and then we would want to create a pivot chart also. So for example, how do we do that? So for example, I will get rid of this, I will get rid of this, my pivot chart, which we can recreate. So find the sales made in each quarter of 2016 for all the regions. So this is what we want. Now how do we do this? So for example, let's select this. We will do a insert pivot table. We will basically say existing worksheet, and then I can select this particular cell. I'll say okay, and now I am interested in data quarterly. So first let's select our field here. So we should basically have, if all our fields are selected, say for example if I say order date, now you see we have quarters and years which are selected. Now we could be selecting these fields which says quarters, years, and if I would want data to be filtered based on years, I could do that, or I could get rid of years. So I have quarters, I have order date. So that's being already selected. Now what else we need? We need to find out for every region. So let's select the region, And we can also add region as a column here. So that will basically give me all the regions as different columns. And then finally we want the sales. So let's select this. And now let's look what we have. So if you see here, we have our data, which is for each quarter. It gives me the total data, but what we would be interested in is not looking at the total data, but we are only interested in quarter of 2016. Now, how do we do that? So what we do here is we have row labels. So let's click on this. So we have date filters, and then in date filters, we can go for between, and then we will say 2016, and the value has to be 1. And then let's select this and let's change this to 2016, and this is 12th month, and then we can say 31. So we are saying the date has to be 2016, and it basically says not a valid date. So let's select a particular date and see. So the month has to be here. So let's change this and let's make it date and say OK. And now we have our data, which is for 2016. So for example, I could basically select this, and here I could be looking at what are the filters we have. So it says clear filter from order data. So we have applied the filter on order date, and these are your date filters, which is basically date 16. Oh, this is wrong. So this one has to be changed to 2016. So select this, and now we have our data for 2016. So we have found the sales made in each quarter of 2016 for all the regions, the grand total for a particular quarter if we are looking at the value, or for individual months in a particular quarter. And we have sliced the data. Now we could have also introduced a slicer by selecting which field we would want to implement. So for example, if I would select a particular field and then I could click on slicer, I could choose I would want to slice the date based on order date, and then could have done it. Or we have just given the date for 2016. Now we just need to plot a graph for this, and that's very easy. So you just need to select the complete pivot data, and here you have the chart options. So let's go for line chart, and that basically shows me the line chart. So we can select this, we can just drag and drop it here, and then we can basically check if that is showing us the data. So if you see here, this is line chart where it has divided the regions in different colors. So we have all the regions. We could filter out in pivot chart a particular region. We have the quarterly time here. In order data, the filter is applied. It says it is 2016. In quarters, it tells me it is 16. So we have our data, we have created a pivot chart, and basically we have sliced the data for 2016. Let's answer one more question, and that's finding the profit made in each year for all the categories of products in East and West regions only. And then we would want to create a histogram for the same pivot table. So histogram usually gives us the frequencies. So let's look at how do we calculate the profit made in each year for all the categories. So what I can do is I can basically select my row ID here, and now I'll do a pivot table. So the data is already selected. I'll choose existing worksheet. Let's select this particular cell, say OK. Now what are we interested in? Now if you look at the fields, we don't see any years or quarters and so on. So for example, here I can just choose order date, and then basically I can choose, say for example, years or quarters, the data which is coming out from my order date. So here I will just select years. Now then I have my order date. So we are interested in the years, orders, and we are interested in, let's look at our column or the question what we had here. So we have years, find the profit made in each year. So let's select profit. So that basically says sum of profit. But then I'm also interested in for all the categories of products. So what I can do is here I have my field which is category, and that I'll add to the columns. So that shows me what are the different categories, and this looks fine. Now I'm also interested in east and west regions. So that is basically in the region. So either we could add a slicer or we could do a filtering here by adding the filters. So first is I'll click on region, and here it says select all. I'm only interested in east and west. So let's select this, take this, put it here. Let's say okay. And now we have the data which has been filtered based on the region. So here we have region. So you can always look at the filter. It is east and west. And we have our year data per year. We have different categories. You can always look at what are these column labels. So this is my different categories, and this is the profit per category, and then you have your grand total. So we have already our data. Now let's say close this. So we have our data for all these years, different categories, the profits made per year. And if I would want, I could go into an year and I could look into different months. So that also is showing up. And now we would want to basically plot a histogram with this data. So I can just place my cursor here. I can select this, and then I can go into insert, and here I have different options. So we can go for bar chart, we can go for insert hierarchy chart, we can go into waterfall, funnel, stock, surface, or radar chart. So there are different options what you have here, and we will go for a simple histogram which is two-dimensional. Let's select this, and here you see you can obviously select different regions. You have your years which shows up, you have your order date, and then you have your categories which can be chosen for your histogram or for your bar chart. And that basically is how you use your pivot table. You use some calculations, and then you can plot your needed graph to visualize the data and understand it in a better way.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.